Now, the PM has claimed that the failed voice referendum was never about him, only to then have a crack at his counterpart Peter Dutton and former Prime Ministers for promising to hold referendums and failing to do so. Anthony Albanese also declared that we need to find a different path to achieve reconciliation. Patrick, he's still funding the Makarrata, the treaty-making commission. Is that the new path? Is that the answer to reconciliation?
Well, we just had a referendum, didn't we? And 6 in 10 Australians said no to the questions. And part of that reluctance to support it was this notion that there was a truth-telling aspect to the voice that would follow, that there would be treaties enacted following that. People were suspicious. And people, I think every decent Australian believes in reconciliation. They don't believe in looking backwards and sort of, being forced to feel shame or guilt. Everybody wants better outcomes going forward. And I think Jacinta Price did a wonderful job of actually explaining we need changes looking ahead. We don't need to look backwards. We've just spent all year looking at the voice, looking backwards. We're sick of it. We're fatigued. We want to move on. And everybody wants reconciliation, but this is not it.
I don't think this is it. And like you said, the Australian people have spoken. It's unequivocal. It wasn't close.
Yes.
And yet we're going down this treaty making. Like, why are we having this when we know if you voted no to the voice, then if you were having a referendum on the treaty, it would be what, 9 out of 10 voting no? The figures would be even more emphatic. You mentioned Jacinta Price, former ABC journo and Indigenous activist Stan Grant. Well, he's still emoting wildly and with some fairly remarkable commentary in a speech he gave. He also did have a veiled crack at Senator Price, describing her as the victorious politician who says this no vote puts an end to the politics of grievance and who waves away generational trauma as mere contrivance. Well, yes. And he also said the politician has no tolerance for history. Pain is negated by progress. Well, pain is negated by progress. I mean, do we want to be always looking backwards and looking at the pain of our ancestors, or do we want to improve outcomes right now and for our children?
Well, I think, look, I mean, he talked about racism in his speech last night. I thought he got a few things very on the mark. He talked about this being a monumental change rather than an inoffensive, I think.
Well, that's right. He said it wasn't, as Anthony Albanese claimed, a modest proposal. That was interesting.
But what I think of, I went up to some Indigenous communities back in August up in Cape York. They weren't talking about the voice. They were very cynical about the voice. A lot of them were, among the, I think it's 37% of Indigenous people actually voted no. Are we going to call them cold-hearted? Are we going to call them racist? It's silly, and it is time to move on, really.
Well, the electorates with the biggest Indigenous populations, the top 5 were emphatic no's, if that means anything. And interestingly, some of the strongest yes votes were for electorates, including mine, that have next to no Indigenous population, 0.2% in Goldstein, for example. So, yeah, that was an interesting trend. Now to the ACT, and several legal experts from across the country, including the Law Council of Australia, have warned that no, actually, I'm going to go to Labor's Misinformation Bill first, then the ACT. Labor's Misinformation Bill, it's been described, Patrick, as dangerous for civil rights. We've got barristers like Margaret Cunneen saying that it's a threat to free speech. This looks like the next big national fight. Are the coalition up to it? They've just had a victory with the voice. This is going to be, I think, another one that is going to really energise the coalition base.
Well, you'd really hope that they're up for it, because this is the wording of this bill is dangerous, and it turns the tenets of of legal practice that have been there for hundreds of years on their head. If you're accused of murder or of rape, you have the right to silence. You don't have to incriminate yourself. Under these proposals, as they are, and it all sounds very Big Brother, doesn't it? Orwellian in the sense of media or government media regulators who will decide what is misinformation, and that they might have the power to coerce people to testify. sorry, that just goes against everything. And you've got some, very, very heavy-hitting legal bodies nationally saying this is wrong, this is dangerous, stop.